Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about extensions. I'm going to talk you through all the things that you need to think about, consider, and get ready for your extension before you start talking to builders and start spending money. So it's really getting you ready for that process of starting your project. So we're going to go through 7 key things that you need to think about and decide upon before you start spending any money. So it's really important that you do your research, think about what you want, think it through, get all your ducks in a row, get everything lined up and ready to go before you engage with builders and architects and people like that. Because if you don't do this, if you don't get everything ready and think it through, then you're likely to have to change things later, and that's going to cost you more money and cause you more disruption. But also, if you hand over control of your project and your design and all the ideas to your builder, then it's likely to cost you more because firstly, you'll have to make changes. And secondly, you'll be doing things that potentially suit your builder rather than suiting what you want. You want to come away with an amazing finish that you are delighted with. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you sat down and thought through every single option, all the ideas, and get yourself ready so that it is the perfect build for you. So let's get started. So the first question, the first thing that you need to decide upon is, what do you want to do? So with an extension, there are lots of different options. So it all depends obviously on your house and what the opportunity is. So it might be, if you've got a really big garden on a detached plot, that you could do a whole host of things. You could go out to the side, to both sides, to the rear. You could do all of that. But it might be, if you've got a small house with a small garden, that you're limited in terms of what your options are. Or it might be if you've got a side return. So in a lot of houses in the UK, we have alleyways between two houses. So sometimes the houses don't protrude all the way through to the back. They have a section which used to be the back entrance, the alleyway, and that's called a side return. So you can fill in that gap to make sure that your whole house is full width. So there's lots of different options in terms of what do you want to do and how do you want to do it. Do you want to add a small extension, so maybe a 3-meter long addition, or do you want to go for the real full Monty and add a full 8 meters to your existing house? So there's a whole host of different ideas and options. One way of getting an idea as to what you might want to do is having a look at your neighbours' properties and seeing what they've done. Because if you live on a road where the houses are relatively similar, then you'll find that people have already had the idea of doing their extension. So having a look at what is there already really gives you inspiration as to what to do. So if you know your neighbours, maybe it's the people next door, maybe it's people opposite or down the road, it's really good idea to ask them if you can come in and have a look at what they've done, because then you'll see the difference compared to your house. So it might be when you go inside there that not only have they done an extension, but they've actually taken some walls out and opened up the whole ground floor, or they've installed a bathroom downstairs or a utility room or a toilet or a study or something that you hadn't thought about, a gym. And it gives you inspiration. You'll be able to see what they've done, and you may want to copy it, or you may go in and think, that's absolutely what I don't want to do. I don't want to have one big open plan room, or I don't want to have a separate space where they've got their gym and sitting area and various other things. So it's a good idea to go and look at more than one of your neighbours' houses if you can, because you'll see what works, what doesn't work, what's a great idea, what doesn't work for you. And then you can use the best of those concepts and incorporate them into your design. So it might be that you see your neighbour's house and think, that's perfect, that's exactly what I want to do. Or it might be the opposite. You might go in and decide it's exactly what you don't want to do. But either way, it gives you those ideas. It gets the cogs turning, gets you thinking about your dream finish. And also with this, have a look in some magazines, have a look in the Sunday papers, all those sorts of things, because there's lots and lots of pictures and ideas and thoughts in there that you can take on board and say, okay, I want full glass bifolding doors, or I want to have a nice window seat, or lots of different concepts. But you need to start thinking about what it was that you want to achieve, because then you can put it into your design and make sure you're delivering exactly what you want. And it also will depend on what's happening with your lifestyle. So if you're at the point of your life where you're having children, then you may need to think about a play area and a nursery and all those sort of things. Or maybe if your children are a bit older, you're thinking about a separate living space for them, having their own TV room and games room, those sort of things. Or if your kids are leaving home and you just want a nice space for you to enjoy and your family, and you know the older people in your house, then maybe you have a big open plan kitchen diner. So there's loads and loads of different ideas and thoughts. You need to work out what's perfect for you and then put that into your design. So it's really important. Work out what you want to do. Firstly, how big the addition is going to be, where it's going to be, whether it's going to be rear or side or both, and then what you're doing with the internal space. So whether you're just adding that additional space as one extra room, or whether you're remodeling the whole ground floor to work with the additional space to be a much bigger open plan space for you to live in. So really important, sit down, work out your plan, and then you know where your starting point is. Okay, the next question that we need to answer, the next thing you need to think about is, do you need planning permission? So this is a really important part of any build process. And in the UK, we've got a really good system that was introduced many years ago, so 20 odd years ago, called permitted development. And permitted development was introduced to make everybody's life much easier. So the authorities decided that they were getting too many applications for people wanting to do very simple things like a rear extension or a side return. So they changed the rules and said, as long as your proposal fits within certain boundaries, then you can automatically do it. So that's what they call permitted development. You're permitted to do that development without needing to get anybody's approval. So it's much easier if your plan fits within the rules of permitted development, because it means you don't have to apply for planning permission. You can just go ahead and start building, which is fantastic. So it takes that hassle out, and it takes the risk of the planners not approving your project. So the permitted development rules are actually quite good and quite varied, and I've built a lot of projects using just the permitted development rules. Type in permitted development into Google and you'll find the planning portal, and that will give you a good flavour as to what you can do under the permitted development rules. But basically, if you're in an attached house, so terraced or semi-detached, you can generally add a 3-metre long extension without needing any approval. It's 4 metres long if you've got a detached house. But actually, they improved the rules a few years ago that said as long as your neighbours on either side don't object, you can actually go much further than that. So you can now add 6 metres to an attached house, that's terraced or semi-detached, or 8 metres to a detached house, which is amazing. That's a huge amount of additional space. But it's only if your adjoining neighbours don't object. If they do object, then you would need planning permission for that extra length. But it's really flexible and it's really useful. If you can get your project to work within permitted development, then it makes it much quicker because you don't have to go through the process of applying for planning permission, which is a little bit cheaper as well. But if you want to do something a bit bigger or a bit grander or something a bit more unusual, then you probably will need to go for planning permission, which isn't the end of the world. Planning permission is relatively straightforward. It just means that you need to make sure that you get a good architect and you've got your drawings correct, and that when you put your application in, you're not going to make any changes in the future, because if you do have to change it, you'd have to go back and get another planning permission. So it goes back to point one. You need to think through exactly what it is you want to build before you start doing your drawings. So it's a sequential process. Work out what you want, then get your drawings. Hopefully, if it goes under permitted development, you can start straight away. If you need planning permission, you'll have to factor in a couple of months at least for that. So the next question, the next thing that you need to work out, and this is a big one, this is the one that everybody always asks me whenever they're talking about their projects, is how much will it cost? Can I afford to pay for it? Is it going to be something that I can do? Or is it just a dream because it's just unaffordable? I just don't have the money. I'm never going to be able to pay for it. So I can't give you a definitive answer to how much will it cost, because obviously it depends on the size of the project, what's involved in terms of your specific location. It will also depend upon what your structure is, so how big you're building your extension. So if it's just a small side return, it'll be much cheaper than a full 8-meter long rear extension. And it also depends upon your finish. If you're having just a standard construction with a window and a door at the back, that's going to be cheaper than if you're going for something that's all glazed with huge sliding doors or bifolding doors, or maybe you've got some fancy roof that you want to incorporate. So it's impossible to answer the question, how much will it cost? But it will be in the tens of thousands. So it won't be cheap. It's similar to the price of a car. In the same analogy, it depends on what type of car you want. So if you go for a cheaper car or a more expensive car, obviously there's a big difference in prices. But it will cost you tens of thousands of pounds. It could be anything ranging from maybe 20, 25,000 right up to £100,000 if you're going for something super elaborate and amazing. But what I can tell you is that prices are rising at the moment everywhere. Interest rates are low. And if you invest in your property and if you do a good job, if you transform the way your house works and improve your ground floor and make it a better place to live and a more attractive place to live, then you should increase the value of your property by more than you're spending. So for me, whenever I'm doing a project, I always like to get 2 times my money, double my money. So if I'm spending £40,000 on an extension, I would want that to add at least £80,000 to the overall price of the property. And generally speaking, that's the way you should think about it. Have a look at whatever it's going to cost, and we'll come on to that in a minute in terms of getting some quotes. But you can get your quotes, work out what it's going to cost. And if it is going to cost you £25,000, then talk to some estate agents and say, okay, my house as it is today, I'm going to add a really nice extension. I'm going to have an open plan kitchen dining room with glass doors opening onto the garden. How much do you think my house will be worth? And hopefully if you're paying £25,000, it will increase by more than £25,000, and ideally 50 or 75 or even 100,000 uplift. And you'll be amazed how adding extra space to the ground floor really does increase your value, because that's where everybody spends all their time. Today, everybody wants an open plan kitchen, dining, living room. That is the holy grail for all homeowners, especially if it opens onto the garden and you've got a lovely space that you can sit outside. So that's really the big selling point. That adds most value to a property. So you should get a return on your investment, but have a look, do the work, think about whether it's worth it. Don't do it if it's not worth it, unless you really, really want the space and you can afford it. The other small point here is that interest rates are very low. So now is a good time to borrow money. So even if you don't have the cash available, have a think about whether or not you want to increase your mortgage. Take on some more debt to pay for this work, because it's super cheap at the moment. So you can get really, really low interest rates. You can get a fixed price deal, so you know exactly how much it's going to cost you. And if it's going to increase the value of a house, but also increase your happiness in that house, make it a better place for you to live, then you should think about doing it. Okay, so you've worked out what you want to do. We've worked out whether we need planning permission. We've had to think about the costs. The next thing now that you need to think about is getting some drawings. So before you can start talking to builders and getting some quotes, you need to have some drawings of what it is that you want to do. So you might not know where to start. You might not know any architects or architectural technicians who can do this for you. So a really good place to start is where we started the discussion here. Talk to your neighbours. So go and have a chat with the neighbours who've already done something like this. Ask them who they used for their drawings and how much it cost. And that's a good starting point. So if you can talk to maybe 2 or 3 of your neighbours, then you've got 2 or 3 different architects that you can have a chat with. And it is amazing the difference in price that architects will charge for simple drawings. So you can find an architect who'll do it for less than £1,000, or you might find other architects who are going to try and charge you £5,000 to £10,000. And that sounds like a massive spread, but that's the reality. Some of these guys are charging a fortune. They're ripping people off. It's too expensive. For a simple extension, you do not need to be paying £5,000. It is too much. Shop around, speak to a few architects who've already done some work in your road, because that's the easiest place to start, because they know your property and they know how to do it. But also go onto Google. So type into Google, I need some drawings for planning permission, and you'll get a whole host of different options come up there. There are some comparison websites. So go on there. You can put your details for your job in, and you'll have 7 or 8 different people will contact you. Get some quotes and go with the cheapest option. So normally I would never recommend going with the cheapest option, but when you're doing drawings, it's quite simple. They're not that difficult to do. I mean, you could do them yourself. I've done them in the past, but for your first time project, you probably want to get somebody else to do it. It's a bit easier, and they also might have some ideas and thoughts and tell you what might work better in your space. But shop around, get a good quote, get somebody you're happy with, and then you're ready to go. You're ready to get those drawings. Now, the architect's drawings are very simple bird's eye views of each floor plan and a side profile and a front profile of your house. So if you go onto the council website, have a look at what your neighbours submitted. That's architect's drawings. They're just a simple outline of what you want to do. They're not structural, and we'll come on to that in a second. But that's your starting point for any drawings. You need some drawings that show the council exactly what it is that you want to build. So that's something you need to factor into your costs, and something you need to factor into the time as well, because it will generally take 4 to 6 to 8 weeks to get those drawings turned around, because these guys are busy. They have to come out, they have to measure every single inch of your house to get a full scale drawing, and then they go off and make the drawings, and you might want to make some changes. So it generally takes a couple of months to get the drawings ready to be submitted to either the planners or the builders. So factor in that time into your equation. It's going to take a couple of months. So all of these things that we're talking about here will take some time. So you should start the process now. Think about what you're going to do. Start talking to people, asking them who they used and whether they'd recommend them. Okay, so the next point now is some structural drawings. So following on from the architect's drawings, which is basically just an outline of what you would like to do, the structural drawings actually provide some detail. So in those drawings, it will specify what steel beams need to be used. So generally, when you open up the back of your house to create a big extension, you'll need to insert a steel beam across the whole rear to support the house above it. So somebody needs to work out how strong that needs to be, how thick it needs to be, and what load-bearing capacity it has, and equally whether it needs to have steel columns, a box frame, new foundations for that particular part of the structure. So all of these factors need to be incorporated into some structural drawings. And those structural drawings are what your builder will use to put together his quote, because basically that's an ABC guide for the builder to tell him how to build your extension. It tells him what materials he needs to buy, so it will specify all the steels, all the timber, what brickwork is going to be used. So it literally is a shopping list for him, but also it tells him what he needs to do in terms of the work. So if he's having to put more foundations in, obviously he's going to have to dig that out, lay the foundation. So it gives him a really good guide as to what is involved in the build. And once you've got those drawings, that means your builder can give you an accurate quote. We'll come on to that in a second. So yeah, we need to get some structural drawings. Now, annoyingly, the people who do your architect's drawings are not the same people who do your structural drawings. Seems crazy to me, and it's been driving me mad for years that you have to find an architect and then you have to find a structural engineer. I mean, it'd be so much easier if it was the same guy who could do both, but it isn't. It's two completely different disciplines. They do different qualifications. So sometimes your architect will know a structural engineer. So ask them when you found the architect that you want to use for your planning drawings, Ask them, do you know a structural engineer and are they reasonable? And hopefully they do. But if they don't, or if they're really expensive, do it again. Go onto Google, type in, I need structural drawings for my house, and you'll get all the options. You'll get some comparison websites, shop around. Now this you can really save some money on. I did a project recently and I got some quotes for it. The most expensive quote I had for the structural drawings was £5,000 and the cheapest one was £600. And I went with the guy who charged £600 and he did a brilliant job. Really, really conscientious, really good guy. Came to site, really helpful, gave me some ideas. So it's not always the case that if you pay more, you get better service. Shop around, it's your money. Don't throw money away when you don't need to. Structural drawings, as long as you've got somebody who's qualified, who's got good reviews and is recommended, then you'll be okay with that guy. So get your structural drawings. Once you've got them, then that is your golden ticket to getting a detailed quote. Okay, so the next on the list is it's time now to get a quote. So this is what we've been waiting for. This is probably what you thought I was going to say right at the beginning, but it isn't, because you need to do all of the things we've talked about to be ready to get that quote. Because as I said before, the last thing that you want to do with a builder and with quotes is make any changes later, because that will cost you a lot of money. It's expensive to make changes. Firstly, it costs the builder more because sometimes they have to undo work that they've already done or they haven't planned to do. But also, your builder is in a monopoly situation. Once you've agreed to do the job with your builder, nobody else can make those changes. So it generally costs you a lot more to do some amendments later. So don't do it. Plan everything in advance and then it's a fixed price job and nothing will go wrong. But to be able to get there, you need to give your builder detailed drawings. So you've got your architect's drawings, you've got your structural drawings, and then you've also got all of your ideas and thoughts and dreams from what we talked about right at the beginning of this video. So you can tell him, I want to have a window seat, or I'd like built-in storage, or I'd like my kitchen in a certain way, or I want a window here, or whatever it is that you want. You need to tell him in advance. So underfloor heating, all sorts of issues like that need to be planned from the start of the job. All the electrics need to be put in before you start plastering the walls and finishing everything. So don't start changing your mind on where you want your lighting or your plug sockets or your TV. Make sure you've thought through every single aspect. Sit down and think about where you'll watch TV, where you'll eat your meals, what you're going to do in the space, so that you can make sure you've planned every single aspect. All the electrics, the plumbing, the heating, everything is thought through from the start. So once you've got all of that ready, you then need to get your quotes. And this is the same process as I talked about earlier. You need to get multiple quotes. So you'll see we've posted some videos on this and it's really useful to have a look at that. But get 7 or 8 different quotes, and that can be from a variety of sources. So if a builder has been recommended to you, then talk to them, get a quote from them for sure, but make sure you get some other quotes. Don't ever go with just one builder and one quote, because you won't get the best deal. Shop around, talk to a lot of different people, get a variety of quotes. So if you don't know builders, do the same as what we recommended before. Go onto Google, type in, I need a local builder, and a load of options will come up. So in the UK, they've got tons of comparison websites, but things like My Builder and Checkatrade and Rated People are good starting points to go on and find a variety of builders. Now that you've got your drawings, you'll be able to share them with the builders, tell them all your specs, so you can say, I want this lighting and underfloor heating and sliding glass doors, all the things that you want. Tell them everything, wooden floors, tiling, whatever it is you want as your finish. Include it in the quote, because then there won't be any additional extras. They won't have to add on the flooring and the worktops and the glazing, because if it's in your quote, it should be all agreed from the start. So get 7 or 8 different quotes, talk to 3 or 4 of those builders, get them round to your house, have a really good chat with them, because it's important that you're happy with those builders, because they're going to spend 3 to 6 months in your house. So you need to be really comfortable that you're picking the right guys, you're happy with the price, everything looks good, and then you're ready to go. Okay, so the very final thing before you do anything, so this is all before you've spent a penny, this is giving you the information so that you can think through all of the different aspects of your build before you start. But the final thing is the party wall agreement. Now, we've got some videos on our channel on this. You can check them out, but I'll give you a quick summary here. But basically, when you're doing an extension, it's likely that you will need to have a party wall agreement, unless you live in a detached house that is set a long way from your boundaries. So the Party Wall Act is in place to actually help people like yourself to complete their project. So it's in your favour, it enables you to do it, but there are certain things that you need to comply with. And one of those is that if you're digging foundations within 3 meters of your neighbour's house, then you will have to sign a party wall agreement, or you'll have to enter into discussions with them, because digging down under the ground close to their house could potentially affect their property. It could cause cracks or movements or something of that nature. So the way that it works is that you need to notify your neighbour, and you can go online and find the forms, or you can appoint a party wall surveyor for this. But you need to notify your neighbour of what it is you want to do. So in this example, you'd say, I'm doing a rear extension and I'm digging a foundation that's close to your property. So you need to notify them. They then have the option of either agreeing to that, so they can sign a consent saying that's fine, please proceed, or they can say, actually, I'm not 100% happy with that. I would like to enter into a party wall agreement and have a surveyor make sure that everything is being done correctly. So that's the second option. Or the third option is that they say, I'm actually in dissent. I don't want you to do it. And then you have to potentially have 3 different surveyors. You have one, your neighbour has one, and then in a worst case scenario, you would have an adjudicating surveyor who would have to make a decision in the event of a dispute between the 2 surveyors. So reasonably complicated if it goes wrong, but relatively straightforward if it goes right. If you know your neighbour and you'll get on well with them, and then maybe they've already done an extension, then it can be a very straightforward process. You just have a chat with them, say, look, I want to do an extension, same as yours, or it's same as somebody else's, and talk it through with them. And generally, you can get them to agree for you to proceed with it. But it is something that you need to factor in, because in a worst case scenario, if your neighbour objects and refuses to sign a consent, it can take 2 or 3 months to get the agreement in place. So you need to start thinking ahead to put it into your time frame for planning, because when you're planning your extension, what you don't want to do is get everything else ready, everything we've talked about in this video. So you get your builder, you've got all your drawings, you've made your decision, you're ready to go, and then your neighbour objects and you have a 3-month delay. Absolute nightmare. You might cause your builder to then go and do something else and you can't get him back. So you need to start planning ahead on all of these things. So think about party wall agreement. Start looking it up on the internet. Start thinking about talking to your neighbours to inform them of what you want to do. It's much better for you if you've got your neighbours on board, you've kept them fully informed of what you're doing, because it will make the build easier, and it also makes life easier beyond the build, that everybody's happy. If you don't tell your neighbour and then suddenly spring it upon them, it can cause bad feeling, and it isn't a great situation to be in if you're trying to do your build. So you need to think through the party wall agreement, notifying your neighbours, telling them, and then getting the paperwork put in place. So they're the 7 things that really you need to be thinking about. And right now, if you want to be doing a project sometime in the future, start working out all the different thoughts on what it is that you want to do, how you're going to do it, who you're going to use, what drawings you're going to get, what builders you're going to use, how you're going to do your party wall agreement, all of that. You start the cogs turning now. Start thinking about this. You should be thinking about it all the time to make sure that you get your perfect extension at the end of your project. Hopefully you found that useful and interesting. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you.